They fired me on the biggest day of my life, publicly crucifying the upstart from the Bronx who dared to outsmart them all. What they didn't realize was that by casting me out, they had just pulled the plug on the global economy. The air on the trading floor is a drug, a chaotic symphony of ringing phones, shouting brokers, and the electric hum of $1 billion changing hands every second. And for the last 5 years, I was the conductor. Marcus Thorne, the boy from the Bronx who built a fintech empire from nothing, now standing on the balcony overlooking my world as I prepared to ring the opening bell. The cameras were on me. The press gallery was packed. Our stock, Thorne Industries, was projected to shatter records today. Again. I had built the most sophisticated predictive trading algorithm the world had ever seen, a system I called Helios. It was the digital ghost in the machine, the invisible hand that brought stability and unprecedented growth not just to our company, but to the entire market. I was untouchable. I raised the gavel, a smile spreading across my face as I looked down at the sea of eager traders. But just as I was about to bring it down, a hand, cold and bony, landed on my shoulder. I turned. It was Arthur Kensington, the chairman of the board. He was a relic, a dinosaur from an era of backroom handshakes and old-boy networks. He looked at me with eyes that held a deep, ancestral coldness. He'd fought my appointment as CEO every step of the way, making it clear he thought someone like me didn't belong in a boardroom, let alone at the head of it. "Mr. Thorne," he said, his voice a low grumble, barely audible over the din. A word. He led me away from the bell, away from the cameras, into a small alcove. The energy of the floor felt 1,000,000 miles away. 2 security guards, men I hired, stood grim-faced behind him. A knot of ice formed in my stomach. "Arthur, what is this?" "The bell." "The bell can wait," he snapped, his patrician face a mask of contempt. "The board held an emergency meeting this morning. We've reviewed certain irregularities in your management." I scoffed. "Irregularities? Arthur, we're about to post the best quarter in the history of this exchange. My management has tripled the wealth of every person on your board. Your methods are unorthodox, Mr. Thorne. Your background is problematic. The algorithm, this Helios, no one truly understands it but you. It's a black box, a liability." He wasn't looking at me, but at a point over my shoulder, as if I were a piece of furniture he was arranging. "It's a gold mine," I shot back, "and you know it." He finally met my gaze. The faintest smirk touched his thin lips. "Was a gold mine? The board has lost confidence in your leadership. Effective immediately, you're relieved of your duties as CEO. Your access has been revoked. These gentlemen will escort you from the building." The world tilted. The roar of the trading floor faded into a dull buzz in my ears. Fired. Live on television, on the biggest day of my career. He wasn't just firing me. He was making an example of me. He was publicly crucifying the upstart from the Bronx who had dared to outsmart them all. Humiliation washed over me, hot and sickening. The security guards stepped forward, each taking an arm. They didn't grab me roughly, but the message was clear. I was no longer one of them. I was a trespasser. They walked me back out onto the balcony. The traders below were starting to murmur, sensing something was wrong. The cameras swung from the bell to me, their red lights blinking like predatory eyes. Kensington stepped up to the microphone I was supposed to use. "Attention!" his voice boomed, silencing the floor. "There has been a change in leadership at Thorne Industries." The rest was a blur. The walk of shame across the floor, whispers and stares following me like a physical force. They didn't even let me go back to my office. They marched me straight to the main entrance, past the Bronze Bull, and pushed me out onto the cold pavement of Wall Street. The glass doors hissed shut behind me, sealing me off from the world I had built. I stood there, dazed, my suit feeling like a costume. The gavel was still in my hand. I looked up at the giant ticker screen that wrapped around the building. Everything was green. A sea of beautiful, glorious green. My numbers. My victory. A victory they had just stolen from me. A bitter laugh escaped my lips. They had no idea what they had done. Helios wasn't just a trading algorithm. It was the central nervous system. I had designed it to be intrinsically linked to my biometric signature, a dead man switch I'd built in as the ultimate security protocol. Without my daily encrypted authorization, the system would interpret my absence as a catastrophic failure. It would assume its creator was compromised and initiate its one and only directive in such a scenario: self-preservation. It would begin to pull all of my company's assets, and by extension, the market's liquidity, into a digital black hole to protect them. I glanced at my watch. The market had been open for 90 seconds. My 90-second grace period was over. As I watched, a single number on the massive screen flickered. A green arrow for Thorn Industries turned red. Then another stock beside it. And another. A tiny ripple of crimson started in one corner of the screen. Then, like a virus, it began to spread. The green disappeared in a cascade of plummeting red numbers. A collective gasp rose from the street around me, followed by shouts. Inside the exchange, I could see panicked motion behind the glass. Then, a sound I had never heard before cut through the city air. It was a piercing, wailing alarm from the exchange itself. The crash siren. The one they only ever tested. They hadn't just fired me. They had just unplugged the world. The siren was an unholy thing, a sound torn from the throat of Armageddon. It sliced through the noise of the city, and in its wake, an unnatural silence fell over the crowd on the street. For a split second, everyone just stared at the ticker, their faces a mixture of confusion and disbelief. Then the dam broke. A woman screamed as she stared at her phone. A man in a tailored suit dropped his briefcase, its contents spilling across the pavement. The murmur became a roar of collective panic. They were watching their lives, their retirements, their children's futures evaporate into thin red pixels, and I was the only person on the planet who knew why. A cold, hard satisfaction settled in my chest. It wasn't joy. It was the grim vindication of a prophet whose warnings were ignored. You reap what you sow, Arthur. My phone began to vibrate in my pocket, a frantic, desperate buzzing against my leg. I pulled it out. The screen was a waterfall of notifications. Missed calls from board members, frantic texts from my CTO, news alerts screaming about a market event of unprecedented speed and severity. I silenced it and slipped it back into my pocket. Let them sweat. Let them feel the heat of the fire they had started. They had cast me out into the cold, but I was the one who had built the furnace. I walked to the edge of the sidewalk, watching the chaos unfold inside the exchange through the massive plate glass windows. Traders were on their feet, some throwing their hands up in despair, others screaming into phones. Paper was flying through the air, like confetti at a funeral. I saw Arthur Kensington on the balcony, where I had stood just minutes before. His face, usually a mask of smug control, was ashen. His eyes were wide with a horror he couldn't comprehend, frantically searching the crowds below. He was looking for me. Of course he was. The dinosaur was finally realizing the meteor was real. The numbers on the ticker were apocalyptic. The Dow was down 1,000 points, then 2,000. It was accelerating, Helios pulling liquidity with the relentless geometric precision of a collapsing star. It wasn't just selling our stock. It was executing complex derivatives and short positions on a global scale, A defensive protocol designed to protect the core assets by burning everything around them. I had designed it to be a shield. They had turned it into a weapon by aiming it at me. My phone buzzed again. This time I looked. The name on the screen made my blood run cold and hot at the same time. Arthur Kensington. I let it ring. Once. Twice. The sound was like music. I imagined him in his ivory tower, the world crumbling around him, forced to dial the number of the man he had just publicly humiliated. On the fifth ring, I answered, but said nothing. Thorne. His voice was a ragged, desperate bark. What have you done? I laughed, a short, sharp sound devoid of any humor. Me? I've done nothing, Arthur. I'm standing on a sidewalk. You, on the other hand, just made the most expensive mistake in human history. How does it feel? Stop it, he pleaded, all pretense of authority gone. For God's sake, stop it. The system is out of control. The system is working perfectly, I said, my voice as calm and steady as the chaos was frantic. It's a security protocol, a fail-safe. It thinks the CEO has been compromised, and it's acting accordingly. I told you in my initial pitch memo, the one you called alarmist paranoia, that Helios was inextricably linked to my authority. You didn't fire a CEO, Arthur. You triggered the self-destruct sequence. A long silence on the other end, filled only by the sounds of shouting and alarms. Name your price, he finally whispered, his voice cracking. Anything. Your job back. The chairmanship. Anything you want. Just make it stop. This was it. The moment of total victory. The world was on its knees, and its king was begging me to save it. I opened my mouth to give him my terms, to lay out the impossible price of my return. But before I could speak, a new sound cut through the pandemonium. It wasn't the market siren. It was the high-low wail of police sirens, getting closer. Fast. A fleet of black SUVs screeched to a halt at the curb, boxing me in. Doors flew open, and a dozen men in tactical gear, FBI stenciled in bold yellow across their chests, swarmed out, rifles leveled. Not at the exchange, not at the source of the chaos. Directly at me. Marcus Thorne, a man in a windbreaker shouted through a megaphone, his voice booming across the plaza. You are under arrest. Put the phone down and get on the ground, now! My mind raced faster than Helios could crash a market. Arrest? On what grounds? This wasn't a hack. It was a feature. I had built the damn thing. I slowly placed my phone on the pavement, the tiny voice of Arthur Kensington still screaming my name from the speaker. I raised my hands, the cold steel of the gavel still clutched in my right. The agents advanced, a wall of black Kevlar and righteous fury. They saw a black man in a bespoke suit causing a global catastrophe. The narrative wrote itself. They weren't here to ask questions. They were here to stop a terrorist. There's been a mistake, I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline surging through me. I can fix this. On the ground, the lead agent roared again, clicking the safety off his rifle. But before they could tackle me, a sleek black town car, the kind reserved for people who don't wait in lines, screeched to a halt between me and the FBI. The back door swung open and a woman stepped out. She was older, with silver hair pulled into a severe bun, and eyes that could chip granite. It was Eleanor Vance, the chair of the Federal Reserve. I'd met her once at a disastrous economic summit, where I told her committee their models were obsolete. She hadn't been pleased. "Stand down, Agent Harris," she commanded, her voice cutting through the tension with absolute authority. The lead agent visibly flinched, lowering his rifle a few inches. "Mr. Thorne is not the problem. He's the solution." Vance turned her piercing gaze on me. "You have 60 seconds to explain this before I let these gentlemen use you for target practice, and we all go back to trading with shiny rocks." I took a deep breath. It's a security protocol, a biometric dead man's switch. My algorithm, Helios, is programmed to interpret my involuntary removal as a catastrophic system failure. It's liquidating everything to protect core assets. The market isn't being attacked, it's trying to save itself. Vance didn't even blink. Can you stop it? I'm the only one who can, I said. But not from the pavement in handcuffs. She gave a curt nod to Agent Harris. Give him what he needs. Suddenly, I was the eye of the hurricane. The FBI formed a protective circle around me as they handed me a ruggedized laptop, a satellite uplink already flaring to life on the screen. The entire world was watching this bizarre street corner drama unfold. I sat on the bumper of Eleanor Vance's car, the gavel still in my hand, and began to type. My fingers flew across the keyboard, a flurry of code and encrypted commands that only I understood. The screen was a cascade of red warnings and system alarms. Helios was a wounded beast, thrashing and biting at everything it touched. It's fighting me, I muttered, sweat beading on my forehead. The protocol is designed to resist outside influence once triggered. It thinks I'm an imposter. Then convince it you're not, Vance said, her tone leaving no room for failure. I needed another layer of authentication, one beyond simple code. My eyes darted around the chaos, landing on the still live news cameras. An idea, insane and desperate, sparked in my mind. I looked at Agent Harris. I need you to get me a live feed. Patch me into every network covering this. Right now. Seconds later, my face was on every screen on Wall Street, every news channel across the globe. I held the gavel up to the camera on the laptop. Helios, initiate voice print authentication. Authorization code. Prometheus unbound. I then brought the gavel down hard on the pavement, the sharp crack echoing through the plaza. It was the sound it had been waiting for. The sound of the opening bell. A command buried deep in its source code, linked to that specific sequence of words and that unique acoustic signature. For a heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. The red on the ticker continued to bleed. Then a single line of green text appeared on my laptop screen. Authentication confirmed, standby. The wailing crash siren sputtered and died. On the massive ticker across the street, a single number for Thorn Industries flickered from red back to green. Then another, and another. A wave of green began to wash back over the screen, slowly at first, then with incredible speed, pushing back the tide of red. Helios, now under my direct control, was reversing the damage, buying back assets, stabilizing the indexes with a speed that made the crash look slow. A hesitant cheer went up from the crowd, growing into a deafening roar as the Dow began to climb, erasing thousands of points of losses in minutes. I closed the laptop, the adrenaline finally leaving my system, replaced by a profound exhaustion. I looked up and saw Arthur Kensington being led out of the exchange by two men who were definitely not his security. His face was a mask of utter ruin. He caught my eye for a brief second, a flicker of disbelief and hatred, before he was pushed into the back of an unmarked car. Eleanor Vance stood beside me, watching the market restore itself. "You have the world's attention, Mr. Thorne," she said, her voice quiet, "and a great deal of its money. The question is, what are you going to do now?" I looked from the restored ticker to the gavel in my hand. They had tried to take my company, humiliate me, and throw me away. They had failed. I hadn't just gotten my job back. I had just become the most powerful man on Wall Street. I smiled. A real smile this time. "Madam Chairwoman," I said, meeting her gaze, "I'm going to ring the closing bell."